Today's video is going to be about many topics centered around Devil Fruit Awakening and the souls that reside within Devil Fruits. Lucci, Luffy, and Kaido will be the main focus, but don't let that make you think I won't be talking about Paramecias or Logias, because I'll be discussing in large about Robin and Law as well. Now, if you just want my take on this, I'll give you the TLDR version right away. So, Lucci can fully awaken his Devil Fruit because he fits two criteria. One, he has a strong enough body because he trained his physical Haki since childhood. Two, because he has the mind of a cold-blooded predator, like that of the leopard soul within his Devil Fruit. Now, Kaido is capable of fully awakening, but only partially awakens because he is not mentally compatible with the dragon soul of his Devil Fruit. And finally, Luffy can't fully awaken his Devil Fruit because his mortal body can't match up to the godly potential of his Devil Fruit. When he does fully awaken his Devil Fruit, that is when Gear 6 will be born. Those are some very bold claims, but if you know me, then you know I never release theories without a lot of strong supportive evidence. Now, this has been a lengthy intro, and I still have more to say, but if you want to get straight into the theory, there should be a time code there. Alright, so if you decided to stick around, then that means my intro wasn't sensational enough to make you want to skip to the theory. Nah, I'm just kidding. But I do actually want to give you more compelling reason to want to watch the whole video. So, the reality is, I'm a little late to making a video on this topic. Many have already made great detailed videos of their speculation, and I recommend that you watch them all, for their unique takes, of course. But what I bring to the table is my expertise on Hakis. I've been making videos on Hakis for 3 years. Many I'll reference in this video because they stand the test of time, and I take a lot of pride in that, hence why I'd rather just give my conclusion at the top of the video so that anybody that wants the instant gratification of knowing my findings can just watch that and leave. However, those of you that stick around are in for a treat. This video is bigger than just chapter 1069 or Lucci and his awakening. Those are great topics and that will make me want to make this video. But I'm going to talk about so much more because I've been working an entire year on a video that explains how Haki mastery becomes Devil Fruit powers. And I believe Devil Fruit Awakening is a huge insight into how that process is possible. So I want you to pay close attention to when I talk about Robin in this video. Now, without further ado, let's get this started. First off, let's talk about how surprising it is that Lucci is confirmed awakened. It is a very rare feat. Not even Kaido has been stated to accomplish it. Apparently, Zoan awakens aren't easy. I mean, obviously, none of the awakenings come easy, but Zoan awakenings have a multifaceted obstacle. Essentially, I believe Devil Fruit Awakening is tied to the blossoming of Haki users, or, as I like to put it, their path towards enlightenment. Let's look at non-Devil Fruit users such as Zoro and Sanji. The more they develop their Haki, the more they develop, or in other words, awaken special unique capabilities such as Ashura and Ifrit Jambe. Devil Fruit users have a similar situation, but because they have predisposed abilities, it is less about freely developing their Haki abilities and more like following the path already laid out for them. This means they actually have to develop their Haki in a certain kind of way. Oda actually confirmed in an SBS that people have an affinity towards different colors of Haki. So what this could mean is that there is such a thing as Devil Fruit compatibility. This concept is the most crucial when it comes to Zoan Devil Fruits, because not only does the Devil Fruit come with a specifically structured power, but its own consciousness as well. This is why even Kaido struggles to fully awaken his Devil Fruit. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, we're talking about Lucci first. I will focus on something Kaido said. Awakening is what happens when your mind and body catch up to your powers. When someone eats a Devil Fruit, the devil within the fruit attaches itself to the user's soul. The body and the mind are attached to the soul, So as a result, devil fruit usually has an effect on the structure of the mind and body. This isn't equally distributed. The soul will always be the most affected, but there is no definitive order of ranking for the mind and body. It depends on the devil fruit itself to determine whether the mind or the body gets second place. If I had to guess, on average, Paramecians have their minds influenced more by their devil fruits, while Logias, on average, have their bodies affected more. You can also factor in the disparity between how much the soul is affected by the fruit versus the other two, but let's not go down that rabbit hole, at least not just yet. Now we're going to turn our attention to Zoan users. I'd wager most of you think it's an obvious pick between whether the fruit affects the body or the mind more. The fruit can literally transform the body. But what you need to factor in is that the Zoan devil fruits come with a consciousness of their own. That plays a huge role in the effect it will have on the user's mind. But don't change your answer so quickly. To make this fun, I won't actually tell you my conclusion just yet. As you watch, come up with your own, and let's see if ours match when I reveal it later on in this video. Now, let's tie this back to Haki and devil fruit compatibility. It is no coincidence that the mind, body, and soul make up a group of three, and there's also three types of Haki. Armament is associated with the body, observation is with the mind, and conquers is with the soul. A devil fruit user has to be compatible with the fruit not just in their uses of Haki, but as well who they are fundamentally at their core. A great example of this is Law's compatibility with the Appi Appi no Mi. I believe that it is a devil fruit that thrives off the user being able to attack with precision, like a surgeon. This means the user should have great observation Haki to know precisely where it is best to attack the target. However, I don't think it's as simple as eating the Appi Appi no Mi and then getting on that observation grind. Let's say Usopp, for example, who is probably going to be really great at observation by the end of the series. I doubt he would do well with the Appi Appi no Mi. Even before Law got his devil fruit, or even before he learned Haki, he was going to walk down the path that capitalized on the power of his mind. To get more specific, regardless of him eating the operation fruit, he had plans to become a doctor. That was a simple enough explanation, but it can get even deeper when you factor in the colors of Haki. This is a theory on my channel that concludes that Haki isn't made up of just 3 types, but rather 7 types spread across 3 categories. Each color correlates to a Haki ability, an element, an emotion, a need from Maslow's hierarchy, and so much more. I have a 10-part series in the works that breaks down Haki in excruciating detail, but in the meantime, you can check out my first attempt at this 3 years ago. In the description, you'll find a link to my Understanding Haki playlist. Now don't worry, I won't be going that deep in this video. Believe it or not, I'm trying my best to stay on topic, which I'm doing a pretty good job at. Well, actually, remember when I said we're talking about Lucci first? Yeah, I lied, but I'm serious this time. We're well equipped to tackle the mystery of Rob Lucci's awakening. Technically, all awakenings are a mystery since we haven't been given a definitive answer as to how one awakens their devil fruit. But what makes Lucci's devil fruit so mysterious is the black nimbus that surrounds him. Sure, Luffy has it in Gear 5th, but he is also a mythical Zoan. That comes with many exceptions. Rob Lucci, on the other hand, has a normal cat fruit. Should we assume that Zoan devil fruit users just get the clouds when they awaken? Well then, how do you explain the jailers at Impel Down that don't have the nimbus? One could argue that they didn't properly awaken, thus they didn't get clouds. That's a valid assumption, but in the pursuit of truth, we must keep our minds open. First off, who's to say there's only one way to awaken with only one outcome? Secondly, the appearance of the jailers tell us that the clouds are not a sure sign of awakening. I want to shout out a fellow creator that goes by the name Triple N. I highly suggest that you check out his series relating the manga chapter of the week to the anime episode of the week. You'd be surprised how many connections there are and how it puts the information in the manga in a different perspective. Case in point, the episode released in tandem with chapter 1069 is the one in which Robin turns into a devil.
One indirect connection is that both the chapter and the episode have a fight with awakened devil fruit users. Of course, both Luffy and Lucci are awakened Zoan users, and Robin is most probably in her awakened form with the Demonio. A more interesting link is that we learned in the latest chapter 1069 that devil fruits are manifested by the power of desire. And we know that devil fruit awakenings occur when the mind and the body catch up to each other, so there is resonance. Robin thus was able to awaken her fruit because to help her friends, she is okay with becoming a devil. She thus embraced the devil inside her and so was able to awaken her fruit.
Oda did not elaborate as to why Robin could do such a thing after never showing such capabilities. Is it a coincidence that her power developed into a devil after being called a devil for so long? Perhaps it was Robin herself that developed the new powers. However, if what I said earlier was true, that devil fruit users follow a specific path to power, anything they do with their devil fruit will be within the confines of predefined capabilities. So that means no branching out and developing new powers. In that case, what Robin did was awaken the powers that are dormant in the Hana Hana no Mi. I'm not saying Robin fully awakened her devil fruit, but rather is making progress.
And some scenes were especially very genius. For example, when Robin hit her Gigantium, her extended arm paralleled the metaphorical path that she took to keep running from her past after Aokiji manifested an icy road for her to escape Ohara. Then the pathway created by her arm turned into the Gigantium blow that extinguished the fire of the hall she was fighting in. It was beautiful, beautiful imagery. Now, about the Demonio form itself, it was wonderful as you subscribing to my channel. If you like the content, do it guys, please.
I know it might seem too good to be true that the same person that received the name Devil Child just so happens to eat a fruit that is meant to turn her into a devil. Perhaps it's not a coincidence, but rather a self-fulfilling prophecy. We are all to assume that devil fruit powers don't activate until they are eaten. But what if they have gravity? The person or thing fulfilling their own prophecy in this scenario isn't the devil fruit user, but rather the devil fruit. We know that Zoan devil fruits have a consciousness, but I believe all devil fruits have a soul. Zoan are the most sentient, but I think even Logia and Paramecia devil fruits have will and desires. If I were to ask you what moment comes to mind in which Robin was demonized as a child, most of you will probably think of the world government hunting her down. Crazy thing is, Robin was demonized even before the destruction of Ohara. People of her village treated her terribly, even calling her a monster. Her aunt was abusive towards her, making Robin feel unwanted. The Hana Hana no Mi might have picked up on this, with devil fruit gravity led Robin to eat the devil fruit. From that point, it is not only influencing Robin to be more predisposed to becoming a devil, but I believe that devil fruit gravity is still in effect post-consumption. Now, instead of the fruit's gravity influencing a person to eat the fruit, the gravitational pull is affecting those around the user to treat them a certain way. In this case, it was not only her aunt that was mistreating Robin, but pretty much everyone around her. Although those with strong mind, body, and or spirit, like Dr. Clover, can resist that gravitation.
Do you believe in gravity between individuals? You ended up tripping over me, of all people, but did you know it was for a reason?
What are you saying? But first, answer me this. Do you believe in gravity? Do you think there's a force that draws certain individuals together? Personally, this moment has made me a believer. You are not capable of killing me. You're here because my gravitational pull led you to me. Don't you see that you shouldn't be wasting your energy on useless drugs? No, you should be using your energy on something much wiser.
Though perhaps the soul within the Hana Hana no Mi originates for someone that learned how to sprout their body externally, as well as the power to turn into a devil and probably an angel as well. So awakening the devil fruit gives full access to the power of its original soul. So it's not so much an awakening of a new power for the devil fruit user, but rather catching up to the power already in the fruit. The potential is within the soul of the devil fruit user, but they need the body and mind capable of using that stored power. So then, let's look back at Lucci's awakening. Sure, you can argue that his new form is something Lucci developed independently of his fruit, but if that were to be the case, then why even call it a devil fruit awakening in the first place? What if all devil fruits are god level after being awakened and not just the mythical ones? Think about the title that devil fruit users get. Buggy is known as the Bara Bara Ningen, which means the Chop Chop human. Mr. 3 is known as the Candle human. It is emphasized that when they eat the fruit, they are still human. It isn't until they awaken that they can access the power of the souls that once reached the enlightened status of godhood. We shall refer to the original hosts of the godly power contained in the fruit as the prime users. Perhaps the prime user of the cat model leopard was a human that gained the power to become a leopard god. It would explain why his awakening has the nimbus around him. Well, when I saw this in the manga, it came as no surprise to me. I'm not just saying that from a place of arrogance. I called this years ago. I've said that all devil fruits derive from the souls of the enlightened kings, also known as wisdom kings. Hyogore directly referred to Gear 4th as a Mio, or in other words, a wisdom king, because of the cloud sash that surrounds him. You might be surprised to hear me say that I don't believe the strength of the prime user should be determined based off the combat ability of the fruit. I believe that Sanji will be one of the strongest characters by the end of the series, but if he were to produce a fruit, it'd probably be a low-ranking fruit in terms of combat. I actually wanted to talk about what kind of fruit Sanji would produce in this video, but it's just going on too long. Thus, it'll be a topic for another day. This is a theory that I've been working on for years, and I wanted to really establish it Understanding Haki Part 4. Unfortunately, I'm really ambitious, and I want Understanding Haki Part 4 to be my best video ever. I believe that devil fruits come from spirits, from souls of people who have mastered Haki, specifically the enlightened kings or the wisdom kings of the ancient kingdom and more. So now, at last, we shall talk about Lucci and Lucci only. So Luffy turns white when he awakens for good reason. Alright, I'm wrong for that. I will talk about Lucci, I swear. I just need to talk about other things to set up the conclusion I have on Lucci's awakening. Whatever progress Lucci made is off screen, so there really isn't much to work with on his character alone. However, we did see Luffy's growth, so we can compare Luffy and Lucci in order to speculate whatever training and progress and growth Lucci went through. Alright, so let's start with a compare and contrast so obvious that all you need is a pair of eyes to point out. Luffy and Lucci both have clouds around them, but Luffy's is white and Lucci's is black. Clearly this must mean that they are opposing forces, but of course it gets much deeper than that. The second most obvious observation is that Luffy has a mythical zone and Lucci has a regular zone. While the two different types of devil fruit aren't necessarily opposite to one another, they do play a role in why their clouds are different colors. Let's go in depth on the similarity. Despite being different colors, it's still significant that they both have clouds. Especially because Luffy had the clouds around him even before awakening his devil fruit with Gear 4. 2.5 years ago, I released a video called Why Rokushiki is and always has been Haki. If you were to pause the video 8 minutes, you would see on screen a picture of Lucci using Life Return paper art fighting form after he says to Luffy, "You can't control your strength," and combat. I write on the screen that Life Return grants Lucci access to different forms. Doesn't that remind you of Gear 4? Maybe Luffy took some inspiration. I've stated in many videos that I believe Gear 4th uses Rokushiki techniques. I focus heavily on his move called Culverine and show that it shares a striking similarity to Life Return. And interesting enough, before Luffy awakened, Kaido commented on that very technique. He stated that there shouldn't be any reason that a rubber man's arm can move that way. I made a Reddit post and recently a video explaining why I believe Luffy's use of Life Return resulted in him awakening. So if you want more on this, I'll leave a link in the description. I'll read one paragraph from that theory. Keep chasing him, Python. After him, Python. Notice how Luffy is seemingly giving his arm commands, as if it now has a will of its own. This is his version of life return. Through training himself to grant his arm a free will, he may have been also subconsciously learning how to give will to things outside of his body, thus effectively learning how to grant his Devil Fruit powers to his surroundings, aka Devil Fruit Awakening. What's interesting is that Kumo Dory, the person who is shown to be the best at life return in the series, refers to himself as a hermit of nature, and we know that Devil Fruit Awakening is the power to affect your environment, or if you have a Zoan Devil Fruit, it's like getting in touch with an animal, which is also still getting in touch with nature. So as you see, there is a similarity between Luffy and Lucci that gives us a clue as to how they were both able to awaken. Even with this similarity, I still believe they took different paths to get there. This is supported by their nature of their Devil Fruits being opposite to one another. Lucci has what I would call a grounded or earthly Devil Fruit, being that it grants him the ability of a flesh and blood animal. It would be considered a physical fruit. On the other hand, Luffy's fruit could be interpreted in two different ways, both of which oppose Lucci's fruit. One way you could look at it is that because it is a mythical fruit, it is the product of imagination, thus is mental. And another way you could look at it is because it is a divine fruit that is literally a god, it leads more towards the spiritual. Both spiritual and mental are things that are usually counterparts to the physical side of things. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all Zoan fruits that aren't mythical are definitively leaning towards the physical, and by the same token, not all mythical zones have to be leaning towards spiritual. I wish I could elaborate more, but this video is going on long enough. But as I told you, I'm working on a huge project breaking down Haki and Devil Fruits, so expect me to explore this topic then. Now back to the main topic. Figuring out that Lucci's fruit is more physical and Luffy's fruit is more spiritual is good and all, but it's just surface level reasons. Remember how I was talking about how Law's personality plays a role in how compatible he is with the Devil Fruit? Well, don't forget that Luffy and Lucci's personality couldn't be any more different. Luffy doesn't take lives and even often saves lives. He's very expressive and honest. Garp is ready to set up Luffy for life by making him a Marine. Luffy could have walked a path that was sure for success, but Luffy just wasn't having any of that. He wanted to be his own man with dreams and ambitions of becoming the king of the pirates. Lucci, on the other hand, has no aspirations to be the highest authority. In fact, he flourishes as being the property of another. The only thing stopping him from being completely cold-blooded, heartless killing machine is the joy he derives from killing. Besides assassination, his second most notable attribute is living a lie as a spy. From a psychological standpoint, Luffy wants to get the most out of his life, reaching all the way to the top of the hierarchy of needs. I credit his ultimate sense of self as to why he was able to achieve Gear 5th, aka awaken the spirit of Nika within him. Lucci barely has any concern for his own security, meaning he resides in the lowest of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You could argue he satisfies one aspect of the safety need if you were to consider him employed, but being a Cypher Pole agent really isn't a job when you're brainwashed and forced to do it. From a spiritual standpoint, Luffy would be considered high vibrational. He is honest to others as well as his own self. He is highly ambitious and inspirational to those around him. While he does have earthly desires, especially when it comes to eating food, he is willing to give that up as a display of conviction to save friends. Lucci, on the other hand, is considered low vibrational. Most of his thoughts aren't his own, and he basically just does what he is told. As a result, he lacks any conviction, belief, or ambitions besides the ones brainwashed into him. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say he doesn't have a strong will. He certainly does. You'd have to have one to go through the brutal and rigorous training of Rokushiki. However, that will is not his own, thus couldn't be called free will. This is a very important distinction because Haki is synonymous with someone's will. So a lot of people interpret having a strong will as having the freest will, but that's just not necessarily true. A will could be used for evil intentions that are tied to things that really are the opposite of freedom. So that just means that the will, while not free, can still manifest as powerful and usually be dark and sinister and evil, like the black clouds that surround him. Now, back to talking about Lucci's spiritual and psychological well-being. He doesn't show much emotion, but the times that he does, it's either anger or joy from the cruel gratification of taking the lives of others. The reason I listed all these things about the spiritual, psychological, emotional, and so forth qualities is to paint a fuller picture on what goes into the awakening of a devil fruit. Given that both Luffy and Lucci are awakened, it must mean that the nature of their fruits coincide with all the traits I've detailed. We haven't talked enough about how their bodies factor into this. All the things I described of their mind and spirit will reflect in what their body needs to awaken. What I mean by this is if Lucci requires a mind and spirit that are low vibrational, then you can expect his body to develop in that manner as well. I've already proven this to be true long before we even see Lucci's awakening. But this is just yet again another thing I've been talking about for years. In fact, it's that very same video, Rokushiki is Haki. I explained it so well in that video, it's almost as if I was predicting Rob Lucci's awakening. All you need to know is that Haki means supreme chi, and the words ki and chi are interchangeable. Chi, in the simplest of terms, is everything, but could also be seen as life force or a source of energy. With that being said, how does chi relate to Rokushiki? Well, for starters, Tekkai is based off of a martial arts style that involves chi.
This chi, or vital essence, could be focused within. Taking that inner focus and developing it through mental, spiritual, and physical discipline, which we know as the martial arts.
So basically, Rokushiki and Haki both involve chi. Now, how can I use that to further compare and contrast the two? The way I see it is that the two have similar origins but take different paths that would ultimately lead to the same point. To back this point up, it is stated in the Vivre card something to the effect of, the mastery of Rokushiki and the learning of Haki make use of similar training. So in the end, Rokushiki is actually spiritual. Yes, I know. Rokushiki is considered a physical ability, and it is. However, everything, even things that are physical, are spiritual. Although energy may appear to take on many different forms, all things in nature, and in fact all things in the universe, are intrinsically woven together, so that we are, quite literally, all symbiotically one with the universe through the system of chi. The thing about spiritual essence is that it's supposed to make up all reality, and all things that exist are interpreted on a spectrum. One way you can look at it is that on one end of the spiritual spectrum you have physical, while on the other is spiritual, and all things in between. Instead of physical, we'll call it earthly, and heavenly will replace spiritual. Now, let's begin our final voyage in linking Rokushiki and Haki. Earthly would represent Haki in its most physical form, which is Rokushiki, and heavenly would be Haki in its most spiritual form, aka Conquerors. What I believe Haki to be is regular ki vibrated at rising levels of frequency. Now, if you look at the spectrum, you'll notice that when chi vibrates at a high frequency, it correlates to the color of white, and at the bottom, the low vibration is black. Does that not match up perfectly? I literally described Rokushiki as path towards ultimate power. Even back then, that was me saying that Rokushiki could lead a person to awakening, to enlightenment, to becoming a wisdom king. Whether it be through their own Haki or a devil fruit, they could attain the ultimate spiritual power. Also, another thing to take note of when looking at their paths is that Rokushiki and Mantra are on opposite ends. That is another thing that just so happens to perfectly match up with one of my most recent theories, in which I suggest that it is highly likely that Nika is an ancestor of the Shandorians. The video in question is one in which I relate Brook to Satan, then Satan to Nika, and then Nika to Nolan. I know that might sound crazy, but the amount of evidence for it is staggering. I'll play a quick clip that is relevant to this discussion. The light of Shandor is actually a bell that is meant to be a sound that can be heard all the way into the heavens by the Shandians' ancestors. Interestingly enough, the way Shindora's dress looks similar to the silhouette of Nika. A bell is an instrument designed to make a sound. And we already know that Nika has the power to make spiritual noise. In fact, it shouldn't have been physically possible for Nolan to have heard the bell. Similar to how it shouldn't have been possible for the Heart Pirates to have heard Luffy's voice underwater. If the Light of Shandor is related to Nika's powers, and they use mantra in that society, then it's very likely that Nika used the concept of mantra to become a sun god. One thing to make note of about Lucci's Devil Fruit is that while it isn't mythical or ancient, it is a little special in the fact that it is carnivorous, which is said to have influence on its user. Essentially, it makes them more primal and bloodthirsty, and all around more suited for battle. However, beyond just that, I don't think people truly grasp the ramifications that carnivorous Devil Fruit has on Lucci's mind. It's more than just about making him less merciful and more cruel, because like I said, he's already like that. It's actually a power boost that goes beyond just increasing his muscle mass. Haki is made up of the mind, body, and spirit. So while it is true the body plays the biggest role in the potency of Lucci's Rokushiki, effects on his mind and spirit can add or take away from the sum of his true potential. In fact, I'm sure at some point the pursuit of strengthening the body would plateau. The effects his carnivorous Devil Fruit has on his mind could help take his power past the tipping point. This is further supported by the fact that he slims down in his awakening as opposed to getting bigger. This all has to do with the fact that Lucci is a sociopath, probably due to his unloving upbringing. Lucci just isn't someone that is in touch with his spirit and emotion. This could be detrimental to development of his Haki and his path towards enlightenment. However, the effects his Devil Fruit has on his mind and spirit could be a supplement to fill that hole in his heart. So while you might think that a mythical fruit is automatically a better option than a regular Zoan fruit, it's truly a case-by-case basis. Not to say that a normal Zoan is the only fruit suited for Lucci, but he's probably better off having his leopard fruit over something like Marco's Phoenix or Jack's mammoth fruit. So in conclusion, Lucci has the mind of a deadly predator and a lethal body strong enough to match the spirit of his Devil Fruit. With all that being said, it still begs the question as to why the Impel down jailers don't have the clouds around them. I could just say it's because they aren't fully awakened. And while that is the reason, it doesn't paint the full picture. I suggested that Luffy and Kaido also aren't fully awakened. To understand this concept of what it means for a Zoan to be fully awakened, we must backtrack. I asked earlier, does a Zoan Devil Fruit affect the mind or the body more? Well, the answer to that is not applicable because it's a trick question. You see, unlike Logias or Paramecia, you can split the powers of a Zoan Devil Fruit into two categories. There's the full transformation, referred to as the beast form, and the hybrid, referred to as the human beast form. With that in mind, I can ask a better question that will actually have an answer to it. Could it be that one Zoan transformation favors the mind while the other favors the body? I think the answer is yes, but it's a bit hard to figure out when talking about the effects animals have on a human's mind because the human mind is so complex, whereas animal minds are more simple. So the change can be subtle. For example, I think that Lucci is more brutal in his hybrid form, but at the same time, he's inherently already like that. Add to the fact that we haven't really seen much of his beast transformation, and even when we did see it, he was still brutal back then, so it's, very muddied. Fortunately, we don't have to look at a variety of Zoan users and make up a tally to try and figure out the most probable answer. We can actually get a very definitive answer from the animal that acquired the mind of a human. And of course, I'm talking about Chopper. Take one look at his form and the answer becomes obvious. When Chopper enters his full form, he becomes big and strong. In fact, it is called heavy point. However, in his hybrid form, he is small, in fact is weaker, but is still powerful because that is the form in which he is smartest, hence why it is called brain point. And just like that, we already figured this out with information Oda showed us decades ago in plain sight. To help us understand this concept of Luffy and the jailers not being fully awakened, let's make up some terminology to help us gauge just how awakened a Devil Fruit user is. We'll start with the concept of fully awakened. I can't with confidence say that we have seen a fully formed Zoan user under the assumption that there are 2 awakened forms. If I had to bet, Lucci may qualify, and I'll explain that a little later. The only confirmed Devil Fruit users I can say without a doubt is fully awakened is Doflamingo, Law, and Kid, because they are paramecias, and I don't believe they have a double-faceted awakening. The awakening of a paramecia has one aspect, and that is granting their Devil Fruit powers to their environment. I would include Katakuri if it wasn't for him being a special paramecia, so perhaps there could be even more to his awakening. Although we could speculate the likes of Aokiji and Akainu, no Logia users have been confirmed officially awakened, but I believe their awakenings work like mythical zones in the sense that it both transforms their body and grants their Devil Fruit powers to their awakening. However, unlike zones, I wouldn't call Logia awakenings double-faceted, because while Logias may have 2 aspects to their abilities, I do believe that they awaken both aspects simultaneously. What makes Zone awakenings double-faceted is the fact that I believe their 2 forms have separate requirements for awakening. In fact, despite there being 2 different forms, I don't think it necessarily means the 2 forms will have 2 separate powers. For example, I believe that Lucci is fully awakened, but I can't say that as a fact because I have not seen his Beast awakened form. However, I don't think it would be all that different from his awakened human beast form in terms of extra effects. It would just make his body stronger, just in a bit different way. While the hybrid form seems to make him slim down, I bet the beast form will make him grow in size. I could even imagine him covered in a lot more of that black fiery aura. He would essentially be a giant black panther. Fun fact, panthers aren't actually their own animals, but rather the name of big felines with black fur, such as jaguars, cougars, and leopards. To make things easier to grasp, we will break down Devil Fruit users into just 3 categories: awakened, sub-awakened, and unawakened. This naming scheme mimics the levels of consciousness. Awakened is what I keep referring to as fully awakened. Unawakened is the default of most Devil Fruit users once they eat the fruit for the first time. Sub-awakened is the gray area of a Devil Fruit user that is capable of accomplishing some aspects of awakening, but not the full potential. So for example, my speculation of Robin's devil form would fall under sub-awakened paramecia. Enel is probably a good case of a sub-awakened Logia user. As for zones, I believe the Jailers, Chopper, Luffy, and even Kaido fall under sub-awakened. I don't call the Impel down Jailers sub-awakened simply off the fact that they don't have the clouds around them. As I said from the very beginning, Devil Fruit users awaken when they walk down a path that leads them to the same point as the prime users of the fruit's power. I believe the reason that the Impel down Jailers don't resemble Wisdom Kings is because they didn't walk down that path. In fact, I doubt they did anything at all. They were most likely unwilling participants in the awakening of their Devil Fruits. I highly doubt to the utmost degree that the host of those fruits are even compatible with the spirit of the prime users in the fruits. When we say that Lucci is an awakened zone user, what we're really saying is that he has awakened the power that was already dormant within him. In that context, I would call the Jailers of Impel Down sleepwalkers. Because despite their fruits being awakened, I don't believe the host of those fruits are actually awake themselves. It is in fact the mind within the fruit that is awake in their bodies. People often refer to the Jailers of Impel Down as mindless, but obviously that can't be true because they can take orders and they have some sense of autonomy. The reality is that they are no different than Frunkfried, the sword that is also an elephant. Despite being an inanimate object, the sword is sentient, and that is exactly when it all should start to click in your head. All the Devil Fruit objects we've seen throughout the story are sub-awakened. It should make even more sense when you consider that Devil Fruit awakenings tend to be more about granting inanimate objects their devil fruit powers. Since an object doesn't have a mind, the soul of the devil fruit has free reign to take mental control. However, those jailers weren't inanimate objects, and that's when the horrifying truth starts to set in. There's really only two options. One, they made the jailers mindless, creating a blank slate for the souls within the Zoan devil fruits to take over. Or the hosts were forced to awaken while still having a functioning mind. And in the awakening process, the soul of the devil fruit took over the host's mind. The host may even still be continuously fighting for control over their mind. Honestly, I don't even know which one is worse. This is pretty much confirmed based off what we learned in Road to Laugh-Tale Volume 4. Understanding why the Impel Down jailers are awakened, I believe helps us to understand how Luffy awakened. I don't think Nika hijacked Luffy's mind. In fact, it seemed as if Kaido might have been speculating or wondering if that was the case. Hence why he asked Luffy, who are you? And Luffy answered, oh, I'm Luffy. However, that might be the case of Nika being a force of good, or that Nika doesn't want to take over Luffy's body. However, there could have been a moment in which that possibly could have happened. I've seen the notion that possibly awakening is triggered by near-death experiences. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, or necessarily has to be the only case. And this is further supported by the fact that Kaido explained that awakening is when the mind and body catches up to devil fruit powers, and didn't mention anything about near-death experiences. However, I do think it played a role in Luffy awakening. It could be that, similar to how the Impel Down jailers' minds could have been blank at the time that their devil fruits awakened, Luffy sort of died. I mean, he really seemed like on the precipice of death. People were saying how his voice faded away, and that basically means he's lost almost all consciousness. Given that being the case, this was foreshadowed actually the first time Luffy and Kaido fought, when he was unconscious, yet for some reason his Conqueror's Haki was still active, his spirit was still active. And as Kaido said, it's when the mind and the body catch up to the spirit, right? So we know that when he's unconscious, his spirit can still be active. Well, at the point that which he got defeated by Kaido that one last time, I believe his mind and body were finally at the point that when his body was unconscious but his spirit was still active, that allowed Nika to awaken, to activate within Luffy. This is paired with what I said earlier with the Impel Down jailer's mind being blank. It leaves space, it leaves an opening for the devil fruit to impose itself onto the user. Now, it's possible that if Nika was, sinister, or maybe he just felt like he could have fought a better battle than Luffy, whatever it is, maybe in that moment Nika could have took over Luffy. But I don't think that is in Nika's nature, because if Nika is like Luffy, well then they both admire freedom and people making their own choice. Hence why Luffy is still in control of his body. So Luffy's awakening may be more like the Impel Down jailers than we realize, and not as much like Lucci's. This leads me to believe that a fully awakened Zoan user literally awakens the soul, like actually the consciousness, meaning they could interact with the soul that exists within their fruit. So you can think of it kind of like a Jinchuriki from Naruto, where the nine-tailed fox can talk to and interact with Naruto. We haven't seen this from Luffy, which is a big reason I believe that he isn't fully awakened. Given that his Zoan is a human rather than an animal, not only will it be sentient, but it'll be something that Luffy could have a conversation with. Once Luffy can really get in touch with that inner human spirit and can coexist, I believe that's where it'll progress to Gear 6. Now, this idea that a Zoan can coexist with their animal is something that's actually not too new. First of all, there's the smile fruits, but the smile fruits are a little bit different, so I'm not even gonna go there. Let's just talk about regular devil fruits. There's still an example that exists. I think we actually seen this with Black Maria, just another user I would consider sub-awakened. I wouldn't call her fully awakened because one, it seems she scientifically modified herself to awaken the soul within her devil fruit. And two, it doesn't seem like she has that same power derived from awakening that you can see from Lucci. Now, with everything we learned, let's talk about Monster Point. Do you think that Monster Point is the same as the Impel down jailers? I used to think so until I did my research for this. While I do think Monster Point is a sub-awakening, there is two things I believe that separate Monster Point from the sub-awakenings of the Impel down jailers. First of all, we know that the jailers are in their human beast form. And by the way, this term is peculiar considering that a beast can eat a Zoan fruit. So would that form be called a beast form? Then you have Chopper, a beast who ate a human fruit. Amidst this conundrum is the clue that Monster Point is different. Besides the obvious power boost, I believe the main thing that leads people to believe Monster Point is the same as the Impel down Jailer's awakening is the fact that Chopper becomes mindless pre-time skip. As I said before, you have to factor in that the jailers aren't truly mindless, but rather have the minds of animals, because that's what their fruit is. If Chopper's fruit gives him the mind of a human, then shouldn't his awakening make him even smarter? I did bring up earlier that one Zoan transformation affects the mind more and the other the body more. Now the key word to catch on there is that I'm using more after body or mind, because I'm not saying that one transformation grants them the body or one transformation grants them the mind. This is evident by the fact that Chopper already has the mind of a human even in his default deer form and in his full human form called Heavy Point. It is only his hybrid form that gets smarter, hence why I say the hybrid form influences the mind more. Now, given that it is his human form that makes him stronger, this tells us that unlike the jailers, Chopper's Monster Point is in his full transformation rather than his hybrid transformation. The second major difference refers back to the fact that Chopper is an animal turning human. Considering that Monster Point was causing him to lose his mind, it's synonymous with saying he's reverting back to an animal. Essentially, it's like saying he's strengthening his body with the power of his devil fruit in exchange for taking away the mind granted by his devil fruit. The opposite happens as a side effect of taking the special Rumble Ball. He loses more of his body in exchange for a more mature mind. It makes you wonder what the prime user of the Hito no Mi was. Perhaps they weren't a regular sized human, or possibly not human at all. A fun topic for a future video. Now, this is where we finished this topic. What's up with Kaido? Is he awakened? I mean, it's hard to believe a Yonko couldn't awaken their devil fruit. All that talk about Haki transcends all, and yet he couldn't transcend his own devil fruit? Besides the fact that we never received an info box confirming he's awakened like Lucci, evidence that points to him not awakening is the fact that his hybrid form doesn't have the flame clouds around, nor does he have the swirly eyebrows of a dragon. Although, in some of his drunken forms, you do see the swirly eyebrows, which further proves he is meant to have them unconditionally when at full power. It reminds me of how Rumble Ball seems to help Chopper awaken. I believe it's fair to say it implies he isn't fully awakened. Perhaps he isn't truly sub-awakened, but rather chooses not to fully awaken because he knows of the drawbacks. Remember how I said I believe a fully Zoan Awaken user has to coexist with the spirit within their fruit. Well, perhaps Kaido can't tame the dragon in his fruit. He most likely fears it would take over his mind in a moment of weakness if he were to awaken it. But what if he is awakened in his full form? Kaido might be afraid of the dragon taking over his mind, but we figured out that the full form relies more on the body. We know that Kaido's body and Haki are incredibly strong, so I have no doubt that he can handle the awakening of his full form dragon. In fact, his devil fruit is a fish fruit. Perhaps for him to even enter the form of a dragon, it would have had to require him awaken first. Listen to Polly Pete's speculation on why Kaido couldn't awaken.
Boys for Egghead, the arc after Wano. So you know Kaido's fruit, right? You fish fruit, model Azure Dragon. You know the reason why he failed at being a Zoan fruit user and why he's not awakened? Because the legend around that fruit is that a carp jumps over some gates. He jumps over the waterfall and becomes a dragon. What is Kaido's introduction? Falling. He falls from a great height. He doesn't jump over a great height. He doesn't jump over a mountain. He doesn't jump over a waterfall. He doesn't jump over a gate. He falls 10,000 feet. That's his whole story arc. Falling. He's willing to take defeat as long as it's from Joy Boy. That's why he never succeeds, because he's actively acting against the nature of the fruit. Give me your thoughts. If you like stuff like this, please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, PollyP Works. And if you like what you see, I would appreciate your subscription. Thank you so much. See you next time.
I have a similar take as Polypede. I think that in the physical sense, Kaido was able to make it over that waterfall. However, in the mental sense, it was just an obstacle he couldn't overcome. Remember how I speculated Lucci could become a large panther covered in an outer layer of his animal spirit? Well, I got that idea from Kaido. I will explore this and more in the next installment of this topic. I will be focusing on Kaido and Luffy with a little bit of Lucci and Blackbeard. We'll also discuss the 7 dimensions that Devil Fruit souls live in, and finally Gear 6th. To help you get a sense of the direction of where I'm going with this, I'll ask you this. Do you think Luffy has a hybrid form? If your answer is yes, then the next question is, would Gear 5th be his full form or his hybrid form? Now unfortunately, I can't give you an exact date when these next videos will be out. In the meantime, I'll be continuing my theory on how Vegapunk gave Seraphim Devil Fruit powers without them having to eat a Devil Fruit. And you know that my theory will hold a lot of weight since it has now been confirmed that they in fact did not eat devil fruits. On my screen now should be part 1 of that theory, as well as my other recent theories you should click on.